Welcome back to Africa 54. The World Bank says sub-Saharan African economies are growing at a faster pace than the rest of the world. The World Bank invited journalists from about 20 African countries via webcam on Monday to join in the conversation about their latest report. VOA's Mariama Diallo has details.
African countries are among some of the world's fastest growing nations, according to the latest report by the World Bank called Africa's Pulse. Countries such as Ethiopia, Rwanda, and Ghana have been growing at a rate of 7% or more in the past 3 years. Poonam Chouan-Paul, a lead economist and co-author of the report at the bank, explains what's behind this strong growth.
Thanks to still high commodity prices and resilient domestic demand, growth has been spurred in Africa.
Chouan-Paul says the same growth is expected in the next year. But despite strong prospects for the region, there is also some downside.
On the external front, there is still the global economy, which is recovering at a weak pace, and there are tensions that could undermine growth both globally and within the region.
The good news is that growth is reducing poverty in Africa, but unfortunately not fast enough, says Shanta Devarajan, the chief economist for Africa at the bank. The lead author of the report says the single most important issue facing policymakers in Africa remains how to harness the growth into accelerated poverty reduction in a continent where more than 50% of the people live on less than $1.25 per day.
Resource revenues are not necessarily the fastest way to reduce poverty for the very simple reason that growth in resource-rich countries occurs in the extractive sector, such as the oil sector or the mineral sector, but the poor earn their income from agriculture. 70% of the poor are actually working in agriculture.
Journalists from more than 20 African countries join in the conversation via webcam.
What advice does the World Bank have in our...
Overall, Devarajan says growth in East Africa has been the fastest. It's fueled by new mineral discoveries, but also increased improvements in macroeconomic policies.
Countries like Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya have been registering fairly rapid rates of economic growth. In West Africa, it's mixed. Sierra Leone last year was the fastest growing country in the world at 21%. Niger is in the double digits, it's about 10%.
Although countries like Sierra Leone has had an unprecedented rate of growth higher than the United States, the country is still considered one of the poorest in the world.
There's a difference between growth and the level of income. The level of income in Sierra Leone is about 1/100th that of the United States. But when you're low, then a small increase has a high percentage point, makes a huge difference.
He also says that African countries have made tremendous progress in their macroeconomic framework.
Inflation was averaging about 15 to 20% in the 1990s in Africa. Today, it's of the order of 5 to 7%. And that makes a big difference to the average person. So when you go to the market to buy things, the prices aren't so high anymore.
While the new assessment finds that Africa continues to grow faster than the global average, much remains to be done to raise the quality of life for the many who still live in extreme poverty. Part of the solution is providing a good education and productive jobs in the formal economy for the continent's youth. In Washington, Mariama Diallo, VOA News.
The Economic Commission for Africa is the United Nations agency for promoting the economic and social development of its member states, foster intra-regional integration and promote international cooperation for Africa's development. I'm now joined by Dr. Carlos Lopes, who is the UNECA's Executive Secretary. Welcome to Africa 54, Dr. Lopes.
Thank you.
Now, in the package that is just ended, there's something that I would like you to kind of connect for us. When you say the economies of Africa, for example, are growing faster than the rest of the world, what does a person in Africa understand by their economies growing faster? What is growing?
Well, actually, we have to first say there is quality of growth that has to be taken into account. You know, you can grow and not have quality, meaning it's not structurally important the way you are doing it. So it's just taking advantage of some trends like commodity prices increasing. It can also be that the equity is not taken into account, so the distribution of wealth is not there, so the majority of the people don't benefit from that growth. But in Africa, we can say there are three characteristics that are quite unique right now. First is the increase of the middle class. It's really growing. There's no doubt about it. It can be traceable. Yeah. Second is the resilience that Africa has demonstrated in face of the economic crisis, partly because Africa is less globalized than the rest of the economies of the South. Therefore, it benefits from an advantage of not being completely integrated.
So it's kind of insulated from some negative
to a large extent.
Yes.
And the third characteristic is that now we already knew about the natural resources in Africa being quite significant, but the discoveries that are coming over the last years is quite mind-boggling. It's actually increasing the potential for Africa much higher than it was imagined. Therefore, the investors are becoming interested, and foreign direct investment is increasing.
Now, you can say actually the bane of African economic growth has always been poor or lack of infrastructure. At what rate is infrastructure being developed across the region?
Well, the news are not that bad concerning infrastructure. The number of projects with a continental impact in the area of infrastructure over the last 5 years is equal to the previous 20. So there is an acceleration of investment on infrastructure, partly because of the new partners that Africa is getting in terms of foreign direct investment.
China.
You have China, but you also have, like, for instance, for the ports, you have the United Arab Emirates that is now running 4 of the biggest ports in Africa, so and increasing and modernizing the facilities. So you have really quite a significant investment in terms of infrastructure. The 10 most important infrastructure projects in the continent are the priority projects of the African Union through its agency, NEPAD. And it's very interesting that in each one of them, we have passed the phase where the feasibility studies or the engineering of capital to make sure that this infrastructure is going to be developed is the main discussion. The main discussion right now is to mobilize really the direct funding.
Yeah, that's one important question we just can't leave out. The regional integration, many say that without having that integration and expanding the regional markets, the individual countries cannot succeed.
Well, African countries have been discussing about the integration for 50 years and not making much progress. So we have passed the stage where the rhetoric is taken seriously. Therefore, what we need really is to see how we can make the push, both from a political point of view and through the economic actors that have influence to do so. And we are seeing some developments that I think are important for us to take notice. First, the financial sector is integrating. And normally it's the most sophisticated part of the economies. And you see that the banks that are emerging both in South Africa, Morocco, Nigeria, with a Pan-African portfolio and a Pan-African reach, are really making quite a difference in terms of accessing funding.
Thank you. And next time when we have time, we'll talk about intra-Africa trade and see how well that is happening. We thank you very much for being with us here today. Dr. Carlos Lopes is Executive Secretary, United Nations Economic Commission for Africa.